Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 2 of the Keynote podcast. I'm your host, Solaris, or Phil, however you refer to me as. So I interview up-and-coming producers in the electronic music scene. And today, I'm joined by Midas, aka Inverted Silence.
Hello.
Midas is a producer from the Netherlands. He makes a lot of melodic music. He has official releases on labels such as Tasty Network, Lowly, and MEGAREX. He has an official remix for Aiobahn, and he has support from artists like Phonon and Voltra. Welcome to the show.
Hello, I'm happy to be here.
So let's get into some questions then. I was just looking at your Spotify, and I noticed that 4 out of the top 5 cities that you have your listeners from, which are Chicago, Los Angeles, Atlanta, Seattle, and Sydney, actually. All 5 of those are not in the Netherlands. So how does it feel to kind of have like an audience that necessarily isn't based in your country?
Yeah, it is actually kind of a thing because there are a lot of people around me that tend to indulge more into local scenes. Um, and I'm not really doing that. Um, yeah, it's US cities, but that's also because that's like Spotify's primary like user base sort of, I feel. Um, I also have a lot of listeners from Japan. But not much in Europe. Um, yeah, sometimes when I'm just at home and I go outside, it just feels like everything is kind of used to that because I used to go in high school when I was still in high school a few years ago. I would also make music. I would hang out with people online, and nobody around me would understand what it's like. In a way, it's still kind of like entered. Um, so when I'm living my life the normal way, it just feels like the music scene is like a thing in my head. And except during ADE. So in the Netherlands where I live, there's like I guess you could call it like a conference. It's like a free 4-day festival slash conference. And it's kind of, I call it like the Comic Con of EDM. Um, and there's a lot of house people there, but usually during ADE, that's like when things suddenly feel real, because then everybody will fly out to go visit ADE and network. And then, I mean, it's like right next to where I live. It's like less than an hour away. So then I go there and then I meet all these people, and then it's like, holy shit, actually, the thing that I do is real and it is affecting people, and it's not just a number on my screen.
Hmm. Yeah, because I was about to go into a little bit about because you're in the Netherlands and ADE, especially with Dutch EDM. EDM seems to be pretty popular in the Netherlands, especially since you have a lot of really popular producers. I mean, for example, Martin Garrix is from the Netherlands, so
Yeah, yeah. It's actually pretty strange because I feel like Uh, culturally, the Netherlands doesn't really care much about their artists. Um, like it's hard to explain. Um, but it feels like um, in the Netherlands, it's like, well, you're cool if you make a lot of money.
oh yeah. So
But
like
but
it's
when it
and what sound is
oh yeah,
popular
go ahead.
too? Is it like something about popular sounds in the Netherlands then?
Well, I guess yeah, in the Netherlands you do have a lot of house music, like more than in foreign countries. Um, and they're like Spinnin' Records is here, for example, and
Hmm.
it's like the center of like future house in a way, and big room. But I find that it often feels like those sounds are like more internationally acknowledged as well. I mean, it's like on the radio here too. Um, but Martin Garrix is like the musical brainchild, but mostly because he's just really internationally famous.
Hmm.
And
Of course.
sometimes I'll look around on social media and I'll find musicians and game developers from the Netherlands that make really cool stuff, and then they don't really get the same acknowledgement at all, just because they're not making a lot of money. That's kind of what it feels like sometimes to me.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, but
So
it's not too bad. I don't think.
yeah, so because of that, like I was about to go into how just kind of you don't necessarily make like a lot of that like festival house music, but you kind of make a little bit more of like kind of a I guess glitch hop kind of electro house kind of stuff with a lot of jazz influence, of course.
Yeah.
Mhm. So how did you get into producing? Let's start off with that.
Okay, so the way I got into music production is um I was in high school, obviously, and puberty kicked in. I was like 13 at the time, and I started feeling kind of insecure about myself, as everybody does when they hit puberty. It's a normal thing. Um, but what's interesting is at the time, I'd spent a bunch of time playing a lot of Minecraft, like a lot of Minecraft, and that's how I learned English. So I would just go in chat like "how fly," and then through that I would learn how to speak English. So my English was pretty good for like a 13-year-old Dutch person. So I did the first few years of high school in English, and I would continue playing Minecraft. And one thing I would do in there is I didn't just want to play the game, I wanted to make content in the game. So I would, make maps and servers and stuff for servers, and then obviously because I didn't have anywhere to host that stuff, I would just leave my laptop open and then like my free online friends would play on it. That's kind of what I spent all my time doing. But then at school, it was like, well, this skill is fun and all, but it kind of feels like it's not real. Um,
Yeah, because
I
it's
was just like, well, I'm only good at something that you can do in a very specific scenario with a very specific type of people. And now I'm in this school and now I'm like super boring. So I wanted to find a hobby that, was more universal and more interesting. Um, so I was listening to Noise Storm at the time. I actually got into EDM through Noise Storm and not like Skrillex or something. Um, Also, a big first EDM artist I listened to was back then known as Caution and Crisis. They made drum and bass remixes of the Minecraft OST.
Chime.
And
He's now
one of
Chime,
those
yeah.
two people is now Chime, yes. Which is really funny um, to me. Like, that's crazy. So I was listening to that stuff just because I was an internet kid, right? And I was like, well, I guess I'll try and make some of this myself because this is kind of funny. They had this like video on YouTube. It had a title like "The Ultimate Dubstep Mix" or whatever, and they would just like DJ like 45 minutes of like dub bro step basically, and like drum and bass and stuff, like melodic stuff.
Hmm.
And I didn't really know how track lists work, so I would just listen to that video. Like I would go YouTube to MP3 and listen to the video. And I really liked they had this one mashup between um what is that song by Skrillex called again? It doesn't really matter. They had a
It's
mashup
fine,
between
yeah.
a melodic song and like a bass song, and I thought that was the coolest stuff ever. And I looked at them on the video, and I've like Chime is like I don't know, like 5 years older than me. I'm like 21. He's probably like 28 or 27. I don't know. But he looks kind of young, and back then he also looked young. So I
He
was
still looks the
watching the
same.
video. Yeah, yeah. I was watching the video and I was like, wow, this guy looks like my age. So if he can do it, I can do it too. And that's why I started, trying to get into music production, actually, just because of that video. Um, which is, yeah, I only got into Skrillex and all of those things that people around me would listen to, because obviously I would go online, try to meet EDM producers to talk to, which was a bit more difficult at the time than it is now, because, nowadays you can just join a Discord server
Mhm.
um, from somebody's Twitter bio. But back then, I would just DM people on SoundCloud and put them in a Skype group together and then see what happens. And they would all be into, like the big artists at the time, and I would have no idea what their songs were because I got into electronic music from a different direction, or at least like dubstep stuff. So yeah, that's kind of how I got started.
And how did you necessarily like find your kind of style of music? I know you kind of talk a lot about it in like your bios, especially like on your website and on your Spotify and all that. You kind of talk a little bit about how it's kind of a mixture of like melodic sounds and heavy sounds, but how necessarily did you find your style?
Okay, so it's actually um I went through a whole bunch of different things, and one thing that I wanted to do from the get-go was make a large variety of different genres. Um, because I looked up to people like uh, AU5 and Virtual Riot. Those are like the big classic ones that everybody
Mhm.
listened to at the time, and I was no different. Um, Also, Volant was a big one when I was 14. They would all make a whole bunch of different genres and release them, at like semi-melodic, semi-heavy. Uh, and I thought it was really cool to just be able to make anything, right? You just want to make this type of song and you do it. So I always went in from the mindset, okay, I want to be able to produce as like a big variety of genres as possible. So I was really bad for a very long time, probably a lot longer than people who focused in on making just one thing. Um, and through that, I kind of made a bunch of like virtual righty bass music. I made like bass house and like glitch music and all that stuff, and I would just try and try until I got better at it. And then eventually, um, one of my bigger inspirations early on was Haywire as well, with his Twofold Part 1 album, and also Twofold Part 2 and all that stuff. And he would have these jazzy chord progressions. And I was like, wow, that has so much depth to it. Like, that's so interesting to listen to and way more interesting than the stuff I can write now. So I would try to figure out, okay, so how do you, get this sound in your music? Like, how do you reach that atmosphere? Um, and it would take me a very long time to figure that out, but basically, I got into music theory through video game music. Um, so when I was a kid, my uncle was a huge internet pirate. He actually got in trouble, with like a huge bill, because he was seeding like everything. And when I was a kid, he handed me this USB stick with every SNES game ever on it. Like it was just like a 32 gigabyte USB stick, and it was like, well, here is every SNES ROM and an emulator. And then I couldn't figure out how to set it up because I was like 7. Like, come on. So then the next time he helped me set that up and he explained to me how it worked. And then as a kid, I played through the SNES library, even though it's like kind of before my time, right? So
Mhm.
I feel like in a way I've kind of, been playing since, the 16-bit era, sort of. Like that's how I got into video games. And that sound and that atmosphere of like Japanese game music feels very homely to me. Like it's interesting. So in hindsight, it's not that crazy that I started pursuing that. When I heard jazz music in Haywire's compositions, I was like, wow, this is really interesting. Um, so then it was like 2018 or 2017 or something that I kept getting better and better at, using jazz in my music. Um, and so after a while, I started pursuing the video game music sound in a literal way, because before then I was just trying to do jazz, basically. So then at some point I went, well, video games have some of these like really big tracks that people really like, and those are always like catchy, funky songs, right? If you
Mhm.
think about like Sonic CD or um,
Or
like there's
even like
this.
a lot of Nintendo games in general, like a lot of just like the like when you think of like the Mario theme or the Zelda theme.
Yeah, yeah. I guess the Zelda theme is like heroic, but there are some games that have like bangers, right? Like, uh,
I
I
mean,
guess
with a
Beat
lot of
Mania
the
is an
Sonic,
example.
just a lot of those like Sega games that have a lot of
Yeah,
just kind of electronic influence to them in general.
exactly. So I wanted to pursue that sound. So I transcribed a crap ton of video game music. So what I would do is I would just grab like a piece of video game music that I liked with a cool chord, or whatever I was listening to. I'm skipping over a lot of stuff, but this is like the gist of it. And then I would try to reverse engineer how it was written. And then after a while, I got a feel for it, and then I could write like that. So it was like 2018, 2019 that I started writing basically just video game music with EDM production. And that's what my style is now. So yeah, it's like VGM with like electronic EDM uh, elements to it, I
Hmm.
guess. And that sort of became the inverted silence staple. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
that's how we're here.
Yeah. Yeah, so did you have any, like, musical background necessarily before you kinda got into music production, or is, like, music production your kind of first endeavor you've ever had into music?
So my parents, they do creative work, but not musical creative work. I don't have any musicians in my family. Um, but my dad is a graphic designer, so you know, I was around computers my whole life, uh, because of him. Um, and so uh, one time in primary school, I went to take drumming class because one of my friends took drumming class and he was cool. So I was jealous that he was a drummer. So I was like, hey, I want to do some drumming too, maybe. And my dad was like, are you serious? You want some drumming? And I was like, yeah, well, I kind of want to do it because my friend is the hot shit because he's a drummer. So I went to try out drumming and I played drums for a few years. But that was basically all the musical context I had before I started producing. So I did like basic drums. And then in 2017, I started playing piano, um, which is, the new instrument.
Mhm.
And this summer, I actually graduated like the first year of like jazz piano college. Uh, I played in a band with three other people from my school, and we had to like do a concert of an hour. So a lot of time went into that this year. But now I'm pretty confident in my piano playing skills, which is kind of awesome. Because I feel like piano does fit me much more. But I didn't really get to, actually have musical education until I, was 18, 19, 17 years old.
So,
Um,
probably, like, once you got to university then?
yep.
Yep, alright. So, how about your production kind of process and your workflow? Like, how does that go? For example, like, your most popular tune on Spotify is Send Off.
Yes.
Where is it? Yeah, it's Send Off, yeah. Uh, how did a how did the production process work for a tune like Send Off?
So basically, how I write the inverted silence tunes. I specify this because I make a lot of stuff that people don't really see. But the way I make this kind of music is I make a jam in piano. So I just have a project with a piano, and then I write some cool chords, starting from the bass notes. So I like make some bass line, and then I harmonize that bass line, and then based on that, I write a melody on top of that, and then I use like a melody form. So I choose the type of call and response that I'm going to use, um, because one time I did a study in Zelda music. I was thinking, all right, well, what music has really good hooks, right? It's Ocarina of Time.
Yep.
Everybody can memorize every single song on that soundtrack. Now, why is that? Why are the melodies on the Ocarina of Time soundtrack so memorable? Um, and it was actually mostly because of a game design element, and also because the composer is very good.
Yeah,
But in
Koji
that
Kondo,
game,
of course, yeah.
yeah, Koji Kondo is awesome.
Mhm.
But if you don't know, you can in Ocarina of Time, there's an instrument that you can play, and throughout the game you learn songs, and then if you play those songs with your controller, you get to do certain things in the game. Now, the Ocarina instrument plays pentatonic scale, so you can play um, basically five notes on the piano. And all of the melodies in that game's soundtrack are so basically, when you learn a song to play, it's a motif from each of the areas or characters, their themes in the game. Um, so the way that was arranged is it's like a three note pattern or a four note pattern that repeats twice, and then there's a variation, or it's uh, so that it would be easy to memorize and play on a controller, basically. And then in the background music in the game, Koji Kondo would take those motifs, the three or four note pentatonic motifs that you could play on the controller, and work them into a longer arrangement. So then, if you're thinking, well, I need something with the forest, you'll memorize the music from the forest and then play that on your controller. And so the reason the Ocarina of Time music is so memorable is because those themes are very short, memorable motifs that are repeated in certain patterns, and out of that rolled like two or three different ways. And usually, when I tackle writing a melody, I think about this. Um, So the way the call response is done in uh, music I really like, and then I use that to write a melody. So for example, ABAC form is like you call, then you have a response, then you call again, and then you have a different response, and then that kind of melody flow is very catchy. So in send off, I did just that. Um, I made the chords and then I wrote a melody like that. And then when I have something that sounds really fun and to listen to on the piano, I start to produce the sound of the song. So I make drums and bass and sounds, pads, hi-hats, crashes, risers, all that stuff, and I basically turn it into a fully fledged production, and then I make the rest of the arrangement. So that's usually how I go about making my music.
That's really cool. So, yeah, it's definitely a different listening experience, of course, going from like video game music and EDM. Have you actually made any like video game music?
Yeah, this year actually I made a whole bunch of video game music. Um, because I was trying to learn about orchestration and the like. So I have a small portfolio with video game music. It's like 6 or 7 tracks, uh, with in different genres. Um, because yeah, like I said, I really want to be able to do a large variety of different styles. So uh, lately I've been doing a lot of practice. Um, And one of the reasons for that is um, I feel like with the way inverted silence music is now, I've kind of boxed myself into certain patterns or like cliches in a way. Um, and when I started out making music, I would do a lot of uh, like bass music, or I would have some like big ideas that I couldn't properly execute. And recently, this year and last year, I've been thinking about how I can actually make those things happen. Um, there's music that I want to listen to that does not exist, so I need to make it. And so I've been making a lot of music behind the scenes that doesn't really see the light of day as like a ramp up to like something new and interesting, but that is still in the works. And tackling orchestration in video game music was just one of those parts.
So, will do you think that those tracks will be seeing the light of day and will be like released as inverted silence tracks in the future then?
Um, mm, I haven't really decided what to do with them yet. That's the thing. I recently did a live show in Osaka, but virtually because of COVID regulations. Um, the label owner of MEGAREX, Poyoshi, he was organizing an event in Japan called Rave Tyson. Um, and I was invited to play there, which was awesome. So I made a video. They would like project the video onto the wall in the club. That's kind of how I appeared, like Hatsune Miku. Um, and in that set, I put a whole bunch of stuff that I had lying around that kind of fit my current sound more in like a more aggressive way. So that set is like full of like different IDs that I made in the last year. Um, uh, some of which I can't release for a variety of different reasons. For example, I get a lot of school assignments and stuff because I go to music school, um, and then they would have a vocal in it that I don't own, and then what are you gonna do with that track?
Of course.
Um, I've been thinking of putting some of that stuff just up on SoundCloud just to see, if people want to listen to it. Um, but it's not like the big release thing that you're looking for if you're trying to do something. If you can't like publish it in a big way. So that's why they're kind of sitting on the back burner. I might turn them into Twitter videos. I don't know yet.
Yeah. So, I guess, what's then your goal with creating music then?
My goal with creating music,
Like, what
uh,
do you want how do you want like, of course, yeah, you want your audience to like your music, but is there, like, anything else that you would want your audience like, is there something you'd, like, want them to feel or something? Is there any, like, underlying meanings to any of your tracks that you would want the listeners to understand?
well, um, for me personally, it's just that I'm kind of sad that the sound is dying out. Um, so I feel like uh, a lot of music that's being released and that's popular, it's been getting better lately, but there was a period where it there wasn't really a lot of room for, you know, interesting melodic ideas and like nuance on that field. Because I feel like if you have slightly more interesting harmony but easy to follow hooks, your music can have a lot more depth. And I feel like the last time that happened in electronic music in a big way was like Haywire's old stuff and maybe Koan sound. And lately there's other people doing that like Phonon and a bunch of Japanese artists are actually killing it. But it's like a niche, right?
Hmm.
That's something that I really love and it's really dear to me. And whenever I hear that, it like livens up my day. And I hope that one day more people will feel the same way about music. Um, that so to elaborate on that a bit, a lot of music that comes from Asia, like Japan and South Korea, or people who produce music for those audiences, there tends to be a lot more lenience in what you can do melodically, um, because people they are more open to that sort of thing. And that's why there's a lot of music from Japan and Korea and all those people that produce there that I really like. Um, and yeah, there's just a hole there in electronic music like EDM stuff where people are not really doing that sort of style right now. Uh, so yeah, one day I hope the fusion thing will pick up and go somewhere. Oh yeah, another good example is Volume. Volume does a really
Hmm.
great job at it too. You've probably heard of his music.
Yeah, I just yeah, his crazy EP that he released on Inspected recently.
It's
Hmm.
really good.
Yeah.
I was really happy to hear that.
Listeners, if you haven't checked out that EP yet, if you haven't checked out the Dayscapes EP on Inspected by Volume, go check it out. It is insane. Volume is crazy, crazy up and
Yeah,
comer.
yeah, for sure. Um, so I guess you could extend that idea, which is something I've played around with in the past, where if you fuse more things together in interesting ways, you can create more nuance uh, in your sound. Like I feel like if you have like a more, how when people write for musicals and stuff, they have
Hmm.
this like very cliche like classical, story
I did
sound
theater in
to it.
high school, so I know exactly what you're talking
Y-
about. Yeah.
Yeah, you know exactly what I'm talking about, right? And
Hmm.
then that kind of sound really conveys a whole bunch of like dramatic emotions for the theater show. And I feel like that kind of palette, especially when you introduce, jazz theory, is more nuanced than just having a four chord like loop thing going on. If the melodic tension curve is longer, it's more interesting and you can say more. Um, And I feel like lately with the internet where everybody's trying to like be the hot shit and have like the loudest, like biggest pop production, hyperpop is kind of like that where it's like, all right, well, we have the vocal hook. Um, you're kind of missing that like nuance in a way because the music is like a vehicle for something else,
Hmm.
um, instead of it trying to tell a story on its own. And it kind of aligns with where people are going in general right now. It feels like on social media and like Discord and all digital communication, everything is either A or B, right? And the thing in between where the tension curve is uncertain, that's the thing that for some reason is very underappreciated. And that's why I make the music the way I do, I think.
Hmm. So it's really cool that you're trying to, bring in kind of a kind of, I guess, in a way, a middle ground, kind of, if the way you're talking about with this whole kind of, in kind of this digital world, especially in the music world, in the production EDM scene, it's either like heavy music or it's melodic music, and you're kind of right there in that middle ground, which is really cool to see.
Yep, exactly.
Mhm. So you did mention like Haywire, Cohen Sound, and I'm gonna circle back to when you're talking about Japan, your show in Japan, your digital show that you did in Japan. So you talk on your bio about being inspired by artists such as Haywire and Cohen Sound. They put on like really cool live performances. Have you ever thought about, kind of having a live performance of that nature and not necessarily doing a DJ set?
Yes, absolutely. I've been thinking about that a lot, actually. Um, so, um, One of the big reasons why I studied jazz piano and why I spent so much time playing the piano in the last 2 years is because I want to be able to perform the complicated arrangements that I'm making for myself. Because that was starting to become a problem. Um, I would write something really cool, and then I wouldn't be able to perform that in an interesting way because it was just too fast. Um, and I feel like if you're doing a DJ set, you're kind of not really connecting with the audience in the same way as when you're actually live performing. Especially if you've played with a band, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about.
Hmm.
Um, there's something to that experience that I think is like kind of understated. And there are a lot of people doing like drum pad stuff and stuff, but piano is really for me, especially since I'm so obsessed with, harmony and stuff. Um, so yeah, I would like to do like a piano performance of my own music in the future. Um, Although yeah, one thing that I'm currently working on. Back in the day, I used to make a lot more like bass music stuff, like things that present itself as bass music. Um, and right now, I'm working on bringing that back. A very large reason why I stopped doing that is actually because Lucy, aka Voltra, we would talk in DMs a lot, and she would tell me that my bass music is really bad. And because of that, I stopped making bass music. And in the last 2 years or so, I've been making a lot of bass music, and it's been reaching a point where it's actually good, and Lucy thinks it's good, and I think it's good. Um, so I'm currently working on some new stuff where I bring that side of my interests back, and I would like to, you know, perform that music on keys as well. Um, because it's like way more interesting than sitting in the dark behind a DJ booth. You get to be up front in everyone's face with your everything. Um, Something some a live performance I find really inspiring is actually Madion's, because he does that.
Hmm.
Although he sings, which is better than playing an instrument. Because if you're singing in a way, you're like you have nothing to hide behind, not even your instrument, right?
And you're really
Um,
connecting with the audience that way too by, bringing out vocals, which of course you understand we as humans, because we speak and we understand words. So singing, of course, is really what's connected to the audience. That's what Madion's really doing there.
yeah, and I think that really works alongside the time-coded visuals. It's like all really great, and I would like to work to reach that level of quality as well someday.
Yeah. So then segueing into the whole thing about visuals, for your most recent track, Snowfall, which was actually a track that was originally made for the All Nighters 6 event, but you later said that you took a little bit more time to release the thing, a little bit more polished. And on your Twitter and on your Instagram, you put up a brief little animated music video that goes along
Yes.
with the art. So I've talked to a couple other music producers, and I'm friends with some who make their own covers as well. Would you say that that kind of plays in your music workflow, that you kind of have a lot more freedom as an artist because you make some of your own art graphically?
Um, well, I don't really consider myself to be much of a like a visual artist. Um, when I do it, I feel like it's more of a necessity than a medium to like properly convey my music. That's one of the things that I feel like I really need to improve in my current project. Um, you'll find that in this interview, I've been talking a lot about my own work in past tense, and that's because I've been internally reworking a whole lot of stuff um, to improve in the future. And this is one of those things that I really want to work on, because in a way, music is kind of undervalued, and how you present it is almost more important than how it sounds, right? You
Mhm.
might agree with that or you might not, but that's
Well, like,
my
yeah, because
experience.
there are people who are, crazy talented who simply just aren't getting enough recognition.
Yes, exactly. And that's usually only to do with how they present their work. And I feel like my art is passable and my visuals are passable, but they're by no means, professional grade. I feel like if I had visuals for my music, I'd want them to be at least as good as somebody. Like I spend all my time thinking about my music, so then if I got visuals, I'd want them to be at the quality standard of somebody who spends all their time thinking about visuals, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
So yeah, in the future, I would really like to work together with somebody who really knows what they're doing. Um, and I do have an interest in uh, visuals and animation, and I did follow a bunch of drawing courses so I can, make some cool drawings and process them. And that's how I did the visuals for my Rave Tyson show. So I just made a bunch of stuff in After Effects and I composited like 40 minutes of visuals. Um,
And that's what
but
you did
yeah,
with Snowfall too, right?
yeah, that's what I did with Snowfall too. Yeah. But it's kind of just I feel like with the drawing stuff, it's just something that I'm naturally decent at, and it's a way for me to like make something that fits the atmosphere of what I'm putting out, and I can do it myself. So that
Yeah.
that's the platform of the style. That's what it means to me,
Yeah.
at least.
And so, yeah, to elaborate on how you mentioned earlier about how you've been talking about a lot of your work in the past tense, are you maybe trying to foreshadow a rebrand or something? Or
Um, it really depends on how everything goes down. Um, I will keep most of this under wraps, but yes, there's a very good chance that there will be a rebrand. It might even be a silent rebrand. So one that you don't see. I'm
yeah,
just
so
going to be a different person.
so it's just like a completely new alias, not necessarily like a name change. It's just going to be a secret alias or something, is what you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah. So then I guess we'll kind of talk about you currently. You have mentioned on some of your bios, on your public bios, about where kind of inverted silence and like what necessarily it means. I just kind of want to know, how did you come up with that? Like where did that come from?
Um, so originally so I have had this name for a really long time. I've released music as Inverted Silence since like 2013, 2014.
Is that the only
Um,
name you've ever released under, or have you had any other names that you've released
I
under?
had another name, but I only had it for like 2 months. So
Okay.
I've basically always been Inverted Silence. Let's just leave it at that.
All right.
And
I won't
um,
go into more detail than that. Don't worry.
um, originally I thought I was gonna be a dubstep alias. And so Inverted Silence was just gonna be loud. Um, and then as time went on, my philosophy on music and what I think is valuable in music changed to be more nuanced um, than that. And I found a way to fit that into the same name um, in a way because it's ambiguous. And in a way, I've always really liked ambiguity and nuance and like combinations between things that are opposites. Um, so that's something that I'll never let go. But yeah, as for that name, I just thought it was better than calling yourself loud. That's how I
That's
came
fair.
up with it at the time.
Yeah, and it's good, like, SEO, search engine optimization, so yeah,
Yes, it's not something somebody else was using, so it was pretty
yeah.
easy. If you Googled
So
inverted silence before it was around, it would turn up basically empty. So that was
mhm.
nice.
So then even with not being the largest producer, but you're still kind of, I guess, on the rise, and you're known by a lot of people in this community, and especially with, like, a lot of my friends who are really just listen to a lot of these underground producers. How would you say your connection with your fans necessarily is?
My connection with my fans.
Yeah, like, you
Uh,
have a public Discord server and you're pretty active in there, but how would you necessarily you wanna kinda talk a little bit more, like, how would you talk about your connection with your fans?
well, my that's actually something I've never thought about. Did you know that? Um, because I'm just
Keeping you
like,
on your
well,
feet.
I put out cool work and then people listen to it if they think it's interesting. Um, yeah, my connection with my fans. Um, I was talking about like why my Discord server was around the other day. I remember not having one for a very long time because I was like, well, every artist has a Discord server and I like know so many people, so if you want to talk to me, like I'm here. Like it's not that hard to reach out to me. Um, so I'm not gonna, make yet another music producer Discord server. Like, who's waiting for that? That's how I felt. And then one day I was like, well, I guess I should make my own Discord server. It was partially that I didn't want to be at the mercy of algorithmic timelines. Um, it's like a mailing list, right? I looked into mailing lists, but email is like old.
That's fair. That's why I reached out
Uh,
to you via Discord.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I actually have like everybody reaching out to me through Discord. Emails are kind of rare, um, nowadays. Yeah, so when I made the server, I originally just wanted it to be a lot like Snail's House's server, because that's where I used to hang out. Uh, so Snail's House's server had a large cultural influence on everybody, because there was a large influx of weeaboos in that server, because of, Ujiko's audience. And in there, people would talk about, the differences between their countries and, that kind of thing. And I thought that was kind of cool. So when I made my server, I kind of wanted it to be the same thing. And in a way, it kind of is. Like nowadays, there's like definitely an inverted silence Discord like subculture happening where people get into certain things because of each other and because of me. But it's I think having a Discord server is kind of interesting because in a way the way people are in the server is like a reflection of yourself but exaggerated. Um so like if you're sometimes immature then people are going to be immature. If you're really into this then people are going to be into that thing more than you are probably. Um and that's been a very interesting experience. Um as for people outside of Discord, because obviously Discord is a very like niche still. Like there are probably a lot of people that know my music that are not Discord users. Um, and so on Twitter, uh, I actually had a lot of issues with how to communicate with people um, on there because I wasn't really for a long time my Twitter really blew up because of Live Enhancement Suite. We've not talked about that yet. But for
We're
a long
going
time, and
to.
yeah, for a long time, and even in a way still today, I'm not quite sure how I need to deal with that. So I'm still kind of finding a way to communicate with my fans and how to, you know, put myself out there in a way that I don't think is annoying. And I've spent a lot of time talking about this with Voldant. There are a lot of people online that just go, "Well, I'm making history right now, and I'm doing the biggest, most epic thing right now. Look, I'm doing this." And then because you keep saying that you're the best, and it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way. So how do you do that if you don't want to do that? It's complicated, I think.
Mhm.
And it's something every artist has to fight with, because I think inherently music producers are introverts, or at least somewhat, with their head in the clouds.
We're just all
And
really
then,
nerdy.
yeah, and really nerdy. So then, if you have to market yourself like that, it's very hard to like feel genuine about that. And it's like a constant struggle. Like, are you gonna be like an internet personality or are you gonna be an artist? Like, what are you gonna
Mhm.
do?
Yeah, but I feel
Yeah,
like with that whole kind of thing and just communities in general, and since we're all kind of like the same, we're all, like you said, just really naturally just introverted. Some of us are a little bit more extroverted than others, but we're also just all really nerdy and just have a lot of similar interests. Like for example, a lot of us people from music came from gaming. For example, you came from, Minecraft and Zelda.
yep,
But yeah, so like we all kind of, I guess we all kind of grew up the same way, which kind of leads us all to kind of have very similar interests.
for sure. Yes, absolutely.
Mhm.
Nice.
Explorers of the internet.
Oh my God. Of course.
Were you expecting this?
I was not expecting this, but go ahead.
Okay, explorers of the internet. What exactly are you allowed to tell us about it?
Um, well, basically as much as I want. Um, Explorers of the Internet is a meme page on SoundCloud with audio jokes, and it's run by me, a bunch of online friends, and a bunch of IRL friends, um, including Lucy. Um, Me and Lucy started Explorers of the Internet. Basically, as long as I've been around, I've been posting garbage on SoundCloud. Um, and Explorers of the Internet was just the next chapter in that. There was an old label page that Lucy had lying around, and it was deprecated, and it became Explorers of the Internet. Initially, the URL extension was IMSide, which is like one of Lucy's old aliases. So then, if people would go on Dubstep Gutter and they would click on the link in the description, they'd just get a bunch of garbage instead of the actual music. That was the idea. Um, and since then, a lot of stuff has happened. Uh, about 8 to 900 tracks of stuff have happened, and now the URL is no longer that, and it's like its own thing. But
Yeah.
initially, it was just a placeholder.
Okay. Yeah, I just kind of wanted to mention that because it seems to be really kind of popular amongst like some of my friends are just like, oh, Explorers of the Internet. That's that page that, Voltra runs. And then there's like a bunch of inverted silent send-off memes on there.
Yeah, actually, a lot of people were accusing me of posting those to like advertise myself. So I guess I can talk a little bit of how it works behind the scenes. So Explorers of the Internet is an invite-only garbage posting page. I guess you could call it a collective, but then if you do that, you start to get into A&R territory, and then there needs to be somebody who decides what's funny enough, which is a huge problem that I'd like to avoid. So that's why it's invite only. Because if people are submitting stuff for the page, then how do you decide what's funny? That's not really a thing. So I actually greatly encourage people to make their own pages on SoundCloud for this stuff, and if it's funny, we'll repost it. Like if we come across it, because we do. Um, and yeah, so there's like I think at this point there's 23 or 24 people that have access to the account, and they just post stuff on it. And for a very large portion of the time, none of us have any idea who uploaded what. Um, so with the send off memes, it was actually other people doing that, and I was
Oh,
seeing
okay.
that because I would check the page and I would just go like, "Wait, who did this?" Because like this is hilarious, and then I guess it just caught on and it like became a thing. Uh, and I am guilty of posting a few send off memes myself. I think I've posted like two or three, but there's like 24, so I don't know what's going on there. Uh, yeah, a large portion of the time I actually don't know whose posts there are. And that's part of the fun because I go on explorers of the internet like everybody else, not knowing like what's what. I mean, I can do a good guess who posts what, but it's always a guess. So, yeah, that's how it works.
I'm happy I brought that up and that you kind of gave us a little bit more insight into what Explorers of the Internet is really all about.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, so since we're kind of wrapping up here, I just got a couple just kind of questions for you, just kind of general questions. What do you wish you had known when you started out producing? Just yeah.
Ooh, ah, what do I wish I had known when I started out producing? Um, I think the main thing that I wish somebody had told me is to not worry about sounding like references when I started out producing. And I should clarify, something I hear people do often when they start out and they want to make loud, aggressive music is they overcompress their masters. And actually, doing that kind of mixing is like an art of its own. And when I stopped doing that, I started improving really fast. So if you're starting out with music production, uh, try to just work with nothing but a limiter at 0 dB gain on your master and make your song sound good that way. And that way you'll be better than everybody else really fast because you have to do things the proper way. That's my tip. Because of that, I feel like I lost a bunch of time that I could have used to, get better faster. If somebody just told me that I should not work with a master, even though it might be more fun, you should not do it. That's my advice.
Is there anything that you still want to learn a little bit more about with production?
Yes, recently I've been really thinking about uh, color bass, actually. Um,
Ooh,
I've been trying to find ways to make color bass that's more interesting because people they vocode their sounds or they use convolution
resonator.
reverb or resonator or delays to add melodic resonances to their sounds. Uh, and I feel like there has to be a better way to do that. So that's what I've been looking into. I'm
Okay.
curious about if there's like a good way to do that.
Yeah. Any color-based producers, make sure to hit up Midas.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
interested.
All right. Is there anything that you want to tell us about the future that I guess we didn't cover already?
Um, yes. Keep an eye out. I will be
Wow.
around. I might not have a lot of stuff coming up at this moment, but I am definitely working on some great things, and I'm really looking forward to sharing it with the world.
Well, I'm super excited personally to hear what you've got going on, and I really also appreciate having you on the show today.
Yeah, I had a good time. Your questions were good too.
I'm Solaris. This is the Keynote podcast. Thank you for listening, everybody. Be sure to give us a follow on streaming services, or if you're on YouTube, subscribe, like the video, do all that stuff. And thanks for stopping by.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Have a nice day.